Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're going to be looking at a really interesting guide to leadership, a more empathetic and effective style. We're diving deep into Cheng Sheng Xingling Dao, a book that seems to be just packed with insights, especially for anyone leading and motivating a diverse team.
Absolutely. And I think one of the most interesting things about this book is that the world of work has changed so much.
Right.
You know, it's not just about managing tasks anymore.
Yeah.
It's really about understanding the people behind the tasks.
Yeah.
And this book really digs into the psychology of leadership.
It does.
And gives some very compelling real-world examples.
Yeah.
And some really practical tools you can use right away.
Okay, so let's unpack some of this stuff.
Yeah.
One of the things that really jumped out at me right away was this concept of the subconscious iceberg model.
Yeah.
And, you know, the book is suggesting that what we see in an employee, their skills, their knowledge,
Right.
it's just the tip of the iceberg.
Yep.
It's like we're only seeing this tiny fraction of what's really going on.
Well, and what's so fascinating is how they use this iceberg analogy to really illustrate
Right.
the hidden depths of employee potential.
Mm-hmm.
Just like an iceberg, there's this vast unseen world beneath the surface.
Yeah.
Personality, values, beliefs, past experiences, all shaping how they approach their work and interact with the world.
It really makes you wonder what you might be missing.
Yeah, absolutely.
The book actually shares this really intriguing story about Shen,
Okay.
a star salesperson who was just crushing it, you know, just absolutely killing it, hitting all of her targets.
Yeah.
And then suddenly just completely nosedives.
Wow.
Performance just tanks, becomes anxious, withdrawn, even starts experiencing physical symptoms.
Oh, wow.
Like, what is going on here? Why is this happening to a top performer?
I think Chen's story really drives home the point that we need to look beyond surface-level performance. Clearly, there's something happening in her inner world, in that space beneath the surface of the iceberg, that is impacting her work.
Yeah.
And this is where that holistic approach to leadership becomes so important.
Okay, so the book looks at a bunch of different frameworks for understanding employee needs and motivations.
Yeah.
They talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which a lot of people are familiar with.
Right.
But then they bring in this idea called Scott Barry Kaufman's sailboat theory,
Oh, yeah.
which I had never heard of.
That's a great one.
I know, and it's a pretty cool concept.
Yeah.
So you're imagining a sailboat on the open sea,
Mm-hmm.
and the hull of that boat represents an individual's basic needs.
Right.
You know, those really foundational elements for a stable and secure life, safety, connection, self-esteem.
Yeah, if any of those are damaged, the boat, or in this case, the individual, is in danger of capsizing.
Right. So thinking about Chen and her sudden drop in performance, could it be that there's like a crack in her hull? Maybe her sense of security or connection has been disrupted somehow, and that's impacting her self-esteem and ability to function at her best.
That's exactly the kind of thinking that the book encourages.
Yeah.
And then it goes on to explain that the sails of the boat represent growth needs.
Okay.
Things like exploration, love, and purpose.
Okay.
These are the elements that kind of propel us forward, give us direction, and fuel our motivation.
Right.
But, and this is key, you need a solid hull, those basic needs met,
Right.
before you can really set sail and thrive.
So how do you actually apply all this stuff as a leader?
Yeah, it's a good question.
Because it's one thing to grasp the concept, but how do you actually put it into practice day to day?
Right.
How do you figure out where those cracks are?
Well, the book suggests two key approaches.
Okay.
The first is pay close attention to how your team members handle their tasks and interactions. Are they stressed, overwhelmed, withdrawn? Are they making unusual mistakes? These could all be signs that something's off, a signal that there might be a crack in their hull that needs attention.
It's almost like you have to become a detective,
You do.
looking for clues
Yeah.
in their behavior.
That's right.
And it can't just be like surface level observation,
No.
right? You have to build relationships where people feel comfortable enough to kind of maybe show some of those cracks.
Exactly. And that's the second approach the book highlights.
Okay.
Building those informal relationships that go beyond just the manager-employee dynamic.
Right.
Getting to know people on a more personal level, their interests, passions, backgrounds. This builds trust and opens up those lines of communication so you can better understand their inner world.
And speaking of approaches, the book also talks about this idea of a leader wearing different hats.
Yeah.
They describe the leader as a manager, a mentor, and a coach.
That's right.
Kind of an interesting way to think about the different roles a leader has to step into.
And each of these hats has a specific purpose. And using the right one at the right time can make a huge difference.
Yeah.
The manager hat is the one we're probably most familiar with.
Yeah.
It's about setting objectives, evaluating performance, and when needed, enforcing discipline.
Right.
Then you have the mentor, who guides skill development, shares their experience and wisdom, acts as a sort of trusted advisor.
And then you have the coach.
Right.
Which is about empowering team members to uncover their own solutions.
Yes.
Through insightful questions and active listening.
Yeah, it's about guiding them to take ownership of their growth and development.
I love the story they tell about Peter, this project manager who's constantly working late, completely overwhelmed.
Oh, yeah.
And his manager kind of puts on that coach hat, helps Peter uncover the root of the problem. His inability to say no.
Right.
And simply learning to set boundaries helped Peter gain control over his workload and his stress levels.
What great examples.
Such a good example.
That story illustrates the power of what the book calls growth-oriented conversations. So by shifting away from giving direct solutions and instead asking powerful questions, leaders can unlock incredible potential within their teams. It encourages critical thinking, problem solving, and ultimately leads to greater ownership and engagement.
Right. Okay, so we've been talking about, recognizing those subtle signs.
Right.
That something might be off with a team member.
Yeah.
Like a crack in their hull, as the book puts it.
Right.
But how can leaders really spot those early warning signs, before things escalate into a major problem?
That's where having a baseline for each team member becomes incredibly valuable. The book emphasizes understanding their typical behavior patterns, their work habits, their communication style. Once you have that baseline, you're much more attuned to even subtle shifts. That might signal a problem brewing.
So it's not just about those casual chats by the water cooler, right? You're actually observing them with a genuine interest in their well-being. Noticing if anything seems out of character. Like, are they contributing in meetings like they usually do? Has their communication style changed? Are they suddenly missing deadlines?
Those are all great examples, and it makes me think of the story about Lao Chen, a brilliant engineer who was incredibly quiet and struggled with communication and teamwork. His new manager recognized Lao Chen's immense potential, but also understood that forcing him into uncomfortable social situations might backfire.
So how did this manager handle this situation? Because it sounds like a really tricky balance.
Well, instead of kind of pushing Lao Chen into the spotlight, the manager found creative ways for him to practice communication through work-related tasks. For example, Lao Chen was asked to present a new system to a small group of colleagues. A task that required him to organize his thoughts and clearly articulate them.
I see what the manager did there.
Yeah.
They were using their mentor hat to provide guidance on presentation skills, but at the same time wearing the manager hat to set the expectation that Lao Chen would deliver this presentation.
That's right.
It's subtle, but really effective.
Very much so. And that leads to another important aspect of leadership that Jinling Dao explores, understanding the different types of power you have at your disposal. The book breaks down what's called the 5 bases of power framework: legitimate, coercive, reward, expert, and referent.
Yes. The framework is based on the work of French and Raven.
Yes.
I remember studying that.
Yeah.
But how does that tie into leading with empathy and promoting growth within a team?
Well, while positional power, legitimate, coercive, and reward is important for setting expectations and boundaries, it's often personal power, expert, and referent that's most effective in building trust and inspiring genuine followership.
So it's not about pulling rank or dangling rewards, but it's about earning respect through your knowledge and skills and the way you treat people.
Exactly.
The book has this really powerful story about Xiaofan, an employee who was struggling with anxiety.
Oh, yeah.
Feeling totally overwhelmed by her workload. And her manager, Chen, really demonstrated a mastery of these different types of power in how she handled the situation.
Yeah, she did. Chen used her legitimate power to approve Xiaofan's request for some time off. And then delegated some of her tasks to relieve the immediate pressure. But what really stood out was how she leveraged referent power to connect with Xiaofan on a deeper level.
You mean how Chen went to visit Xiaofan at home?
Yes.
and shared a personal story about her own experience overcoming a serious illness.
Exactly.
That was really powerful, going beyond that typical manager-employee dynamic.
It was such a beautiful example of empathy in action.
It was.
By sharing her own struggles, Chen created a safe space for Xiaofan to feel seen and understood. And that act of vulnerability can be incredibly powerful in building trust and fostering open communication.
It's definitely making me reflect on how I can show up for my team
Yeah.
with more vulnerability and authenticity.
Yeah.
This deep dive is already sparking so many ideas.
That's fantastic. And speaking of ideas, Chengjingling Dao introduces another useful model called the Ability Willingness Matrix
Okay.
to help leaders tailor their approach based on a team member's current state.
Ooh, I don't think we've touched on that one yet. What's the gist?
So imagine a simple grid.
Okay.
One axis represents an individual's ability to perform a task, and the other represents their willingness or motivation.
Okay.
This creates 4 quadrants, each suggesting a slightly different leadership style.
So, for example, if you have someone who's highly skilled and motivated,
Yes.
they land in the able and willing quadrant.
Right.
You might take a more delegating approach, giving them autonomy and space to shine.
Precisely. But if someone is struggling with both ability and willingness, landing in that unable and unwilling quadrant,
Right.
it might require a more directive approach,
Okay.
providing clear instructions and closer supervision.
I can see how understanding where someone falls on this matrix
Yeah.
could really help leaders tailor their approach and avoid those frustrating situations
Right.
where you're kind of using the wrong hat for the situation.
Absolutely. And the beauty of the ability willingness matrix is that it can be applied to any task or project,
Right.
from something simple like writing a report
Mm-hmm.
to something more complex like leading a new initiative.
Okay.
It encourages you to constantly assess your team's needs and adapt your approach accordingly.
So much of this book seems to come back to awareness,
Yes.
being attuned to the needs of your team, understanding their motivations, and really flexing your leadership style based on the situation.
That's a great observation, and it reminds me of another insightful model the book discusses, the SATI iceberg.
Okay, so we had the subconscious iceberg model earlier. Now we've got the sadder iceberg.
Yes.
Is there a connection?
There is. Both models emphasize that what we see on the surface is just a fraction of what's going on beneath. But the sadder iceberg takes it a step further
Okay.
by suggesting that behaviors are just the tip of the iceberg.
Right.
Beneath that, you have the feelings driving those behaviors.
Okay.
Then the perceptions and interpretations shaping those feelings. And finally, at the very bottom, the core needs and yearnings of the individual.
So it's like peeling back the layers of an onion, trying to understand the deeper roots of someone's actions.
Exactly.
How does this apply to leadership, though?
Well, imagine you have a team member who's consistently late for meetings.
Okay.
On the surface, it might seem like disrespect or laziness.
Right.
But if you dig deeper using the Satyr iceberg, you might discover that they're feeling overwhelmed and anxious about their workload,
Okay.
leading to a sense of powerlessness that manifests as lateness.
That's a completely different perspective.
It is.
Instead of jumping to conclusions and reprimanding them, you're seeking to understand the underlying feelings and needs driving their behavior.
Exactly. And that's where empathy becomes so critical.
Yeah.
By understanding the deeper layers of the iceberg, you can respond with compassion and support rather than judgment and punishment.
Wow, this book is packed with so many powerful tools and frameworks.
Yeah.
I'm feeling a little overwhelmed, but in a good way.
It is.
It's like a whole new way of looking at leadership.
It is. And Chengjingling Dao emphasizes that it's a journey, not a destination.
Right.
There's always more to learn and ways to improve. But by embracing these principles of empathy, awareness, and flexibility, you can cultivate a leadership style that empowers both you and your team to thrive.
I'm definitely feeling inspired to start applying some of these ideas. But before we wrap up, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on something.
Okay.
We've talked about understanding the inner world of our team members.
Yes.
But what about our own inner world?
That's a great question.
How does self-awareness play into all of this?
That's a fantastic question. And it's something that Chengjingling Dao addresses directly.
Okay.
It emphasizes that effective leadership starts with understanding ourselves, our own strengths, weaknesses, triggers, and biases.
It's that classic advice, know thyself.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
But how do we actually go about deepening our self-awareness?
Yeah.
Especially within the context of leadership.
The book offers a few practical suggestions.
Okay.
One is to cultivate a regular practice of reflection. Take some time each day or even each week to simply sit with yourself and ask some probing questions.
Okay.
What am I feeling right now? What are my thoughts about my team, my work, my leadership style? What patterns am I noticing in my behavior?
I can see how that could be really insightful.
Yes.
Just taking a pause to step back and observe yourself from a more objective perspective.
Exactly. And another suggestion is to seek feedback from others. Talk to your team members, your colleagues, your mentors, and ask for honest feedback about your leadership style.
Okay.
What are your strengths? What are your blind spots?
Right.
This can be incredibly valuable information, even if it's a little uncomfortable to hear.
That takes courage, for sure.
Yeah.
But I can see how it would pay off in the long run.
It definitely does. And finally, the book encourages leaders to cultivate a growth mindset. Embrace the idea that you're constantly evolving and learning.
Okay.
Be open to feedback, new perspectives, and different ways of doing things.
That resonates with me.
Yeah.
It's about letting go of that need to be perfect
Mm-hmm.
and embracing that messy, beautiful process of growth.
Exactly. And remember, self-awareness isn't a destination. It's a lifelong journey.
Mm-hmm.
The more we understand ourselves, the better equipped we are to lead with empathy, compassion, and authenticity.
Wow. This deep dive has been so thought-provoking.
It has.
Cheng-Xing Lingdao really packs a punch.
It does.
All these insightful models.
Yeah.
And practical strategies, I mean, I'm already thinking about how I can apply some of these ideas to my own leadership style.
It's amazing how much practical wisdom is contained in this book, you know? And I think what's so compelling is that it encourages us to kind of shift from a purely transactional approach to leadership, where it's all about tasks and metrics, to a more transformative approach that prioritizes relationships, growth, and really understanding that whole person.
If you had to kind of distill the essence of Cheng-Xing Lingdao, into a few key takeaways.
Okay.
What would you say are the most important things listeners should remember?
I think one of the most powerful takeaways is that leadership isn't about wielding authority or dictating orders. It's about understanding the needs, motivations, and aspirations of your team members and creating an environment where they feel valued, empowered, and inspired to grow.
It's about fostering that sense of psychological safety, where people feel comfortable taking risks, sharing ideas, being their authentic selves without fear of judgment.
Exactly. And another key takeaway is the importance of self-awareness.
Yes.
Cheng Dao really emphasizes that effective leadership starts with understanding ourselves, our strengths, weaknesses, triggers, and biases.
That's right. It's about cultivating that inner awareness so we can show up as the best versions of ourselves as leaders.
Yeah, and it makes me think of that quote, you can't pour from an empty cup. As leaders, we need to make sure we're taking care of our own well-being and cultivating our own growth so that we can effectively support and guide others.
So for our listeners who might not be in, formal leadership positions, how can they apply these insights to their own work and relationships?
Well, even if you're not leading a team, you're likely collaborating with others, navigating complex dynamics, and striving to achieve goals. These same principles of empathy, understanding, and clear communication apply to any relationship, whether it's with colleagues, clients, or even family members.
It's about recognizing that everyone has their own iceberg, with all of those hidden depths and complexities.
Yes.
And so by approaching interactions with curiosity and a genuine desire to understand, we can create more fulfilling and productive relationships.
Absolutely.
In all areas of our lives.
You know what I find so inspiring about Cheng Lingdao is that it offers this really hopeful vision of leadership. It suggests that by embracing empathy, fostering growth, and building strong relationships, we can create work environments that are not only productive, but also deeply human and fulfilling.
It's a reminder that work can be a place where we learn and grow and connect with others in meaningful ways.
Absolutely.
And that to me is a really exciting prospect.
It is. And remember, this is just a starting point. Cheng Lingdao is filled with so many practical tools
It is.
and inspiring stories.
It is.
I encourage everyone listening to pick up a copy and dive in.
Yes.
You might be surprised by what you discover, both about yourself and about the power of leading with empathy and intention.
What a fantastic way to wrap up our deep dive.
Yeah, this has been great.
It feels like we've only just scratched the surface
I do.
of this incredibly rich and insightful book.
Yeah.
So much to ponder.
So much.
Until next time, keep diving deep.